This video will be about business entities in general. There are four basic kinds of business entities: sole proprietorships, partnerships, corporations, and limited liability companies. Partnerships can be broken into two categories. Sole proprietorships are probably the simplest, but one thing you have to understand about lawyers is lawyers use the word person in reference to corporations as well as naturally born individuals. When a lawyer says person, they're talking about any kind of individual or entity that, for example, is capable of owning property. An individual, when a lawyer says individual, they're usually talking about a natural born person. A sole proprietorship is the kind of business that can only be owned by one natural born person. That's why in the handout, or excuse me, in the JPEGs I'm using to make this video, I say sole proprietorships are essentially created every time a person is born. The sole proprietorship attaches to the person. It's the same as the person. It can't do anything without the person doing something. But they operate just like any other business, and in fact they can use what's called assumed names. They can do business as a different kind of name. If I start a business, I don't have to call it the Patrick Brady Business. I can call it the Chicken Shack. I can call it anything I want to, like as if I have an alias. Okay, there are two types of partnerships, as we said, limited and general. Let's start with general because that's really the simplest. A general partnership is kind of like a sole proprietorship, except instead of having just one person, you've got 2 or 3 or 4 or 1,000. Just like a sole proprietorship, the partners in a general partnership are kind of considered to be one and the same as the business. The business of the general partnership can, on its own property. So if the partnership buys a piece of property, the deed will be made out to the partnership. Checks from bank accounts for the partnership will have the partnership's name, not the individual partners, although the individual partners could sign the checks. But the partnership owns property on its own. A general partnership does not need anything special to be created except for an agreement by the partners.
For a partnership to be created, a general partnership that is, it does not need to be in writing and it does not need to be registered with anybody. It just has to be an agreement between the partners, and it can be a verbal agreement. Now, because the partnership is kind of considered to be the same as the partners, it will not pay its own taxes. The partners will pay taxes on their share of the profits from the partnership. So in that way, it's kind of like a sole proprietorship. With a sole proprietorship, the sole proprietor pays taxes, and that's it. With a partnership, general partnership, the general partners pay taxes, and that's it. The partnership does not pay its own taxes, which may seem like common sense to most people, except with a corporation. The corporation will pay taxes before the owners. So in a way, with the corporation, the profits are taxed twice. Let's say, for example, a corporation makes $1 million in profit. The corporation will pay taxes on the profit and then distribute that profit to the shareholders or the owners. And then when the shareholders or owners get their cut of the profit, they have to pay their taxes on it. So the tax, with corporations, the profit's kind of taxed twice. And that's because corporations are considered to be their own persons. But in any case, with partnerships, it's different. General partnerships, I mean. Limited partnerships are not the same as general partnerships. With general partnerships, the partners pay taxes on their shares of the profit. The partnership does not pay its own taxes, which is a good thing. Now, in another video, I talked about joint and several liability. I talked about how that applied to general partnerships. And the principle of it is general partners are jointly and severally liable for the debts of the entire partnership. If the partnership as a whole owes somebody $1 million, then any one of the partners could be made to pay it. Within the partnership, The partners might agree to something different, but it has to be an agreement between all the partners, and it's only binding on the partners. So if the partnership owes $1 million to a bank, the bank can still come and get that $1 million from any one partner. But then the partners, let's say there's 4 of them, might agree that they're going to split it 4 ways. And if the bank goes after one of them, then the other 3 would reimburse the one who had to pay the $1 million. They'd reimburse them a quarter of the debt each. But that's within the partnership between the partners. They owe a duty to each other to uphold the agreement of the partnership.
For a limited partnership, there are 3 main differences between it and a general partnership. First of all, to create a limited partnership, the agreement has to be in writing and it has to be registered with the Secretary of State. Second, taxes are treated differently with a limited partnership. You don't need to know what the taxes are exactly, it's just that they're treated differently. But the reason it's called a limited partnership, and the big difference is that within the partnership, there are limited partners who have less power and less privileges. They are treated differently from general partners. They don't get to control things as much. They don't get as much of the profit. They're also not on the hook for as much of the debt. So we already talked about corporations a little bit. The main thing you need to know for corporations is that they are owned by the shareholders or the stockholders. It's the same thing. But they are owned by people who own shares of the corporation. Those people can vote to appoint directors, officers to control the day-to-day management of the corporation, although not everybody that owns a share of stock will be allowed to vote. There are different kinds of shares. Some are voting shares, some are not. But in any case, you need to know corporations are owned by the stockholders. On a day-to-day basis, they're run by the officers and directors. They pay taxes. So, like we talked about before, taxes are sometimes paid twice on the profits. But the nice thing about corporations is that it protects everybody involved from liability. The liability of the corporation is not passed on to the owners. If the corporation has to go bankrupt, that does not affect the stockholders so that they have to go bankrupt. The stockholders don't have to step up and pay the debts of the corporation. The only thing the stockholders have to lose is the value of their stock. And finally, we come to limited liability companies. The only thing you really need to know about them is they combine the best of both worlds. Limited liability companies do not pass along the liabilities to their owners. Their owners are called members. And the members are kind of like stockholders in a corporation. They can lose the value of their membership, but that's it. So if a limited liability winds up killing a bunch of people and owes $1 billion because of it, that $1 billion debt is not passed on to the members. And then like a partnership, it does not tax profits twice. If it's set up correctly, the taxes are paid by the members after they get their cut of the profit. So that's a limited liability company. It's the best of both worlds. And that's the end of the video. Thank you for listening.